Alright, this happens every so often. I put together some triple triad stats, and now you have to suffer through looking through them with me. So this put a bit of time to put together, but I did get lazy at the end. I did not update it for current results. The things we're going to look at today are things that mostly wouldn't be broken into by recent results. A lot of the things require winning a lot of games, and winning a lot of games is very difficult when there's very few games to win. But these five players, I suspect, would either have an appearance or more appearances had I updated properly, and I do apologize to them. They should consider this a personal attack. Um, I also tried, the format of this is going to be so you want to be like so and so, and then I list something, talk about something I think really cool they achieved that's maybe not the normal thing, right? Like for Delial, who will be included, I didn't do who's won the most championships because yeah, it's Deli. It's Deli by a lot. It's a really awesome achievement. He's now up to 11, which is insane. You can go find that on the leaderboard. This is stuff that takes a little more digging into the data. It's also less meaningful, right? I'm not claiming like Deli's 11 championships are worth more than insert obscure stat here, or worth less than I should have said. But yeah, so we're gonna look a little odder for the numbers we're looking at today. I'm sure at least one of these I've done before, but yeah, should be probably a couple of these, but should be interesting. So you want to be broccoli. So I think the coolest thing Broccoli ever did was she wins the first TTAC ever, which is the first tournament she played. We'll come back to winning her first tournament later in this video. But she wins the first tournament she ever plays. She sticks around for a bit. She defends her title at least once. I think once. I'm not sure if she played the second title defense, but she keeps her title once. Um, and she drifts off the site. Years and years and years later, she comes back and wins her very first tournament back. Again, she wins the first tournament she plays. She wins TTAC 1 and she wins TTAC 9 8 whole years later. This is such a cool achievement. So, what I wanted to do was I wanted to look not for the people who had the longest time between tournament wins, because, like, TTA went on break essentially for a few years, and the people who won after are likely to have really long gaps. So I set it to what is the biggest gap between your first and second tournament win? No one had their first tournament win before TTA disbanded, and then their second win after it came back. Thanks to Kaus for not breaking that. He will be an honorable mention here. So I just looked for the longest, and here is our list. There are only 6 players who had their first and second win at least 3 years apart. Um, you might notice that Nightwish says 2012 and 13. That's a typo. That should be 2010 and 13. Um, I wish I'd caught that earlier rather than looking now and being like, that doesn't look right. Um, but actually, it's really interesting. Now, there are, of course, not very many two-time winners. Multiple time winners. I think there's like 15-ish. I might be making that up. I'm not sure, but I think it's a minority of them have a gap of at least 3 years between their first and second tournament. If we took it to 5 years, it drops to only 4 players. But of those 4 players, I think the real standouts are Kamikaze, who really did go inactive for long chunks of time, hence the ongoing joke that he and Scythe were the same person, because they were never both active at the same time, at least while I was on the site. And Broccoli is the one who really took a long time off. Um, that says took 4 years off. I think it's longer. I think she was gone in 2004 or 5 and she took like 6 or 7. Um, I think that's a mistake too. The rest of the video will be mistake free. I hope. I think I loaded all the mistakes at the start. Turdz is actually a really interesting example here because I think he's someone who he had a really good 2008, but I think he's gotten a lot better over time. I think we have the really interesting kind of version of Broccoli, a player who just disappeared, came back, and kept winning. Kamikaze, a player who was really dominant, took some time off, came back, and was still really dominant. The others tended to play pretty consistently and pretty successfully throughout these periods. They just didn't get their second tournament win for a while. But I think Turdz is someone who really improved himself over time, and especially in the return has been just so impressive. But I do think Broccoli is the standout of this list, and I think it's a really cool thing that I think Kamikaze is the closest to comparing to. Sujiro had his great run in '06, and he took a few years off and came back in 2011, I want to say, and made finals of a TTAC. And Kaus, of course, won the very first tournament ever and made it through the winner's bracket to finals in SE Zidane, but ended up being beaten twice by Cookie. But he would, of course, been a very fitting pick for this list, as he's taken many, many years off over this time. So he would have been a really cool inclusion if he had done that. Cookie doesn't make the list, even though he also had many years off, because he won his second tournament 2 years after his first. So winning his third tournament, 17 years after that, that's not what we're counting here. But you might credit Cookie a bit for stuff on this as well. So you want to be Seto. Now, of course, Seto has, done many, many very impressive things. I think I know people include Doc Evil. For me, there's a very clear top four players of all time. Seto is obviously in that group. He has a very good case for greatest of all time. But one of the weird things he does is how irregularly he plays tournaments. He tends not to disappear. You won't see many runs where he's just like not on the site for 3 or 4 years. But what you will see is he'll play a tournament, maybe two, then he won't play the third or the fourth. He might play the fifth, won't play the sixth. And I think that's really hard to do. It's really hard to maintain the absurd level of play he maintains. He's got one of the highest win percentages of all time. The only thing like not making it like one of the best arguments against him being GOAT is that two of the other contenders played more than him, and so they amassed more titles and more achievements. And so you can definitely, this is kind of held against him whenever you look at the stats. He doesn't have as many titles as the other very top players, but it also means that he's not like staying that active. He would regularly play tournaments, and I was very active during some of these years. I'd never see him playing games, and then he'd just play and win a tournament. And like, sure, he had the time when he was hiding on a weird second account when he won the tournament as Vivi, but like, that's not the only tournament he won, and that's not the only tournament he went deep in. I think this is so hard to do. Like nowadays, you see him playing a lot of closed with Turdz, and closed is not useless for playing open, but it's not open practice. And he comes and wins Ultimisia, and I never see him playing open outside of tournaments. And maybe I'm missing it, but like, it's really hard to do what he does. It's really impressive. I'm sure he's played some of the 1 minute stuff that people are having fun with now. I think I saw that he had played a little. I didn't catch the games though. But I think what he does is really cool. And so what I wanted to do was look at people who took the best runs of tournaments where as soon as you play 3 tournaments in a row, that third tournament doesn't count and we end your streak there. But you're not allowed to miss years. You can't miss a full year of play. If you play a tournament in 2008, you skip the next, you play the next two, you skip the next, and then you miss all of 2009, that ends the streak. So that's how I set up the streaks. And here's what we got. You'll notice Seto, and I think this is the only time we'll see this on the list, has separately the 2 longest streaks of this, with 26 and 25 wins. No one else is at all close. When I went sort of semi-inactive from 2010 to 12, I get the next longest run, but it's pretty far behind both of his. Piggyman has the next longest run, which I'm really pleased by. That makes me very happy. Piggy's a true great. I also want to shout out players like Steve here. Steve has one of the least lucky tournament runs. Just an incredible amount of like 2-1s, really steadily not winning any icons, but constantly being good and beating good players. And it's one of Genova has a run a little like this, but I think Steve is kind of the premier run of like the most consistently strong run a player has had without getting an icon. And some of it is because, and I think he has an icon, but it wasn't from this run. But some of it is because of longer tournaments, right? You could go 3-1 and not get an icon in some of these tournaments. But a lot of it was just really unlucky when his wins and losses happened. If you're winning, 60% of your games, you're going to get lots of icons over time. It takes a lot of really bad luck to not get it. Bren also has a really good run. I think it's a little underrated historically. Soaps is a player I don't know enough about to talk about, but like Soaps clearly great. And Kazdon was a player, when I showed up in 08, I had a lot of trouble playing against Kazdon. I thought he was very, very good. Um, so, yeah, wanted to shout out a couple players just to say what the list is. Championships is obvious, wins is obvious, but achievement is a number we're going to see a bunch of times. And this is just my very simple formula to kind of add up your icons. It's you get 1,000 points for a tournament championship, 500 for a finals, 250 for a semis, and 125 for a quarters. Um, just used a lazy tennis-like system. You could easily say like you're overvaluing wins or you're undervaluing quarterfinals or you're overvaluing you could say you're undervaluing wins. I care about wins a lot more than double finals, etc. It's just my lazy measure, and it gives a quick sense of how many icons were achieved. It can be hard to compare over time though, because earlier it's harder to achieve icons. Fewer players do, you have to play more rounds to get there. Later, I think the opposition is stronger, so it's harder to get wins, but it's easier to get achievement because you don't have to make it as many rounds to get that icon. So your mileage may vary. That's what I think is going on. Um, but I thought I'd include achievement as a regularly shown thing. At first, I was listing just how many icons you got. I like achievement a little more as a measure than icons, but your mileage may vary. So you want to be Reanimator. Um, Reye was a very strong player. Beat me in the last weekly open he played, or the last one which I played maybe, and beat me really convincingly and compellingly. Played a very good match. Had a really bad random that he just played to a very comfortable tie, and then absolutely demolished me the next game. So the most sort of historically outstanding thing that Reanimator did was win a ton of games in a single tournament. There are a few ways that this can be done. One is there were some 7-rounders early on. Two, there are some 6-round TTACs where if you win the title match, I count that as a 7-0, right? Or in a closed tournament, you could go to the loser's bracket. The earlier the better, have to play extra rounds and rack up those wins. Now, this is both the way you can get the most wins, but you do have to keep winning. You cannot lose another match or you're out. Ray has a really solid tournament record, but he kept losing to Great Sephiroth. This could happen to anyone. Let's look at who has the most wins in a single tournament. You see, this double elimination bracket stuff has the top 3 results. Only one of the top 3 players actually won the tournament they were in. The other 2 in Garland both went to the losers bracket in the first round and then fought their way very deep in the tournament. I believe Yojimbo made semis, or losers semis maybe, and Reye made it all the way to the grand finals where he reset the bracket, which is another win, from losers bracket before losing in grand finals. Cookie ended up winning Zidane. Yojimbo, as I said, made it very far in Garland. Then you see Karmazin and these other players who won 7-rounders. Triad Wars with an interesting streak of being the 7-round tournament. Barrett was a 7-rounder, but with a lot of buys in the first round, but MC didn't get one of those buys. He played all 7 rounds. And Vid was actually the winner of Garland, but because he stayed in winner's bracket the whole time, didn't have to win as many games. Because, you get a benefit from not going into losers. But yeah, I think it's cool that if you want the person who won the most matches in a single tournament, it's Raminator, followed by Cookie and Yojimbo, and then a big tie. And then there's a big tie on 6 after that. Because it both includes all the players who have won 6-round tournaments, and it includes all the players who have made the finals of 7-round tournaments, basically. All right, so you want to be Sujiro. I talk about Sujiro a bunch. He's a player I like, have a fun, I think I'm more excited about Sujiro's career than most people are, though everyone who has played him or seen him play knows he's very good. But a cool thing that if you look at his results chart is he earned what I think of as hitting the cycle in baseball. That's if you get a single, double, triple, and home run in the same game. He earned his winners, finals, semifinals, and quarterfinals icons, distinct icons, one for each result, really, really quickly. And he had, a short to mid-length career, under 20 tournaments played. And just put in a lot of results very quickly, took some time off, came back, made another finals, then disappeared again. It's really impressive, and I also really appreciate if someone's going to have this really strong run over a few years, you know, '05 to '07, I think, okay, Doc Evil is the best for part of that, but there's a part of that where he and Kamikaze are probably the two best players on the site before Seto and Delial take over. I think, you know, he probably, there's a moment where he's the best player, um, maybe more than one. And yeah, he's one of those players, like when you talk about kind of who's the best player, he doesn't end up having like the greatest of all time type career, but he is one of the players who's probably the best on the site for a bit. There's a case for Cookie during some of '06 as well, but I think Sujiro's results around Eris, I mean, he's probably got to be number one for a second. When I've done elo charts, he pops over Kamikaze at points to take the one slot. So anyway, I just thought this was a cool thing he did, and I always like shouting out Sujiro because he's one of those players that didn't play that long. Oh, and I was saying also, I like it when players return. It's really interesting to see players who dominated one period compete with another period. Now, oftentimes, that first period, they're in love with the game, they're playing really actively. The second period, even if the skills haven't deteriorated, and they may have, right? We're all gonna get less sharp, you're also less excited about it, and you're probably not grinding as hard and that excited to get in the games, and that's got to hurt you as well. But his comeback was fantastic, and it's always really cool when that happens. And it speaks to both how good he was, but also how good other players of kind of the '06 period could be. So here are all the players who have hit the cycle and how many tournaments it took them. I want to say I think the Delial number is hilarious because obviously he had done many of these things over and over, but it took him 55 tournaments to finally lose in a finals, and it was not for lack of making the finals. But he never lost a game in a finals until tournament number 55 that he played, which he lost to Turdz, by the way. And interesting to see Turdz and Sir Smokes there too. You can also see some people at the top of the list who were really good in the breakthrough. The last icon they earned, I listed which was the last one you got to, was the title. And, you know, you see that with Seto, you see that with MC, you see that with Nightwish, you see that with me, where, you know, you've done a lot, you were strong, and then you break through and get the win. I don't think my 14th was, my last was the win. I think that one I typoed. I think that one's supposed to be a finals. Yeah. All right. Well, that's another error. Mine should say F, not win. Um, I was much faster at losing in a finals than Delial was. But yeah, I think it's curious to see what the last thing earned was, and Sujiro ends up still being the second fastest to ever hit the cycle. So you want to be Kaus Debonair. Yeah, so in StarCraft, rookies that win their first major tournament, this is back in the day, they don't really apply it to nowadays, though I don't think any rookie has won it in the recent past. But back when it was OSL and MSL were the two big tournaments, um, you were said to have conquered the Royal Road if you won your first tournament. And, you know, depending on format, a number of different players did this, but for Triple Triad, only 4 players have won their first tournament on TTA. So for the list, because 4 players is a boring list, I also included players that won their second or third tournament ever. They'll be clearly separated, don't worry, I'm not mixing them. And there's only 10 players that ever won any of their first 3 tournaments, and one of them won 2. Shout out to Doc Evil. Yeah, Kaus Debonair, there's, you know, obviously a bazillion things to say, and hopefully over the course of my many videos, I've said many of them. He is the inaugural tournament winner. He's one of, if not the most acclaimed clan leader. He's one of, if not the most important community figures. I mean, I guess Dalamar's number one, but like Kaus is in my like 5 most important triple triad figures of all time. Like, for me, it's hard not to think Dalamar's first and Balls is second, but I might be wrong about that. And then third is Kaus. And I think Kamikaze is fourth, and I don't know who fifth is. It probably depends a lot on like what you consider valuable. Like if you're really focused on say tournaments and graphics, then Seto should obviously be there. And Seto could be there on tournaments alone and probably on graphics alone as well. If you're really focused on graphics, there are other names. I'm not going to know them because I'm not focused there. If you're really focused on Occult fan, you might mention someone like Bryce, but Kaus is probably the person you're going to go to. Also, Kamikaze shows up there. So do people like Bren and Reanimator, and Piggyman was an editor, and Yoshikin, who's also a pretty important tournament clan leader. Yoshikin is a serious case for just top 10 community figures of all time. Obviously, I can't speak to a lot of earlier players. I'm sure Ace is in this conversation. And again, it is going to depend what you focus on. But for my money, it would be really hard for Kaus not to be third. He also had a really good 2008. And also, he almost won a tournament in 2023, and it would have been kind of incredible if he won a tournament 20 years later. Uh, I'm really hoping he takes a tournament in 2028 or something, just so it can be on some anniversary, and then we just got to shut down the site. That's just got to bookend it. Obviously, I do not want to actually shut down the site, but if we were going to, wouldn't that be the perfect time to do so? Um, so here is the tournament number. So Kaus won the first tournament ever. This is not how many tournaments have you played, because of course this is your first, second, and third tournaments respectively. But Kaus won the first tournament ever. Broccoli won the second. Doc Evil won the fifth and seventh, and Firebrand won the sixth. These are the only players to have ever won their first tournament. I think that the four that happened so early does say that player strength increased over time, such that a new player was not able to break in. But it's also worth noting these weren't really new players breaking in. Most, if not all of them, probably all of them, but I wouldn't know, were players who had played on other sites and other things. They weren't just coming into the game. They were strong players competing with other strong players, and they ended up beating them the first tournaments they played. But after this, it is worth noting no one came in and was immediately strong enough to win their first tournament. If you look at people who won their second tournament, you will also see Unfixable and Karmazin were very early. And really, Slash of Time winning his second tournament as the 24th tournament ever is really, really impressive. I think if you're looking for something just stunningly good about Slash of Time, that's it. And when I tried to set up a rating system based on the online rating systems that Microsoft uses for their competitive shooters on like Xbox. I don't have an Xbox, but I looked up different rating systems that I could use as alternatives to ELO. And the first few tournaments, it goes, great job winning, but I don't know if the opponents you beat are very good yet. Slash wins his second tournament, and it goes, wow. And that if you use Microsoft-based rating systems, they're a true skill rating or whatever it is, it will tell you that Slash is like probably the best player of all time. Largely because of winning his second tournament in such fantastic fashion against strong opponents. And then we have players who won their third tournaments. Also, these are a little later in the site. I think this is pretty impressive as well. Virgil, Meta, and Suikoden. The one interesting thing about them is all of them were pretty short, either very short-term players, or in the case of Suikoden, played a little longer, though not that much longer, but without tournament success after that. And so actually, if you look at this list and you think who really carried on their success long term, Broccoli, of course, won her tournament 8 years later. Slash of Time, of course, went on to win 3 tournaments and is, top 10-ish all time. And Kaus Debonair, who was just a very solid, he will show up on some later lists as well, very solid tournament player for a long time, with peaks at the start and in 2008. All right, so you want to be Yojimbo. Okay, so obviously I could have done a hell of a lot of stuff for Yojimbo because, like Seto, he is in the GOAT conversation. For a long time, he was the leader in most counting categories, the like championships, finals, icons, just total tournament wins. Delial has since surpassed him, but until return, it was Yojimbo, and again, basically, if not every category. The one he was a little lower on was semifinals, but because he had an insanely good semifinal record. Like the reason Delhi has has a really high championship rate compared to finals rate is because he wins all his finals, right? And Yojimbo had a similar thing for semifinals, the all-time I think highest win percentage in semifinals. So I'm not sure he was the leader there, but he might have been as well. But I wanted to look at something that wasn't just that kind of counting stat, that was a little odder. So I looked at who has made multiple finals in a row, because Yojimbo had a run of consecutive finals that I thought was unsurpassed in Triple Triad history, and it was unsurpassed in Triple Triad history. So here is the list of the players with the most consecutive finals. Now, the first thing you will notice is Yojimbo's at the top, but the second thing I hope you notice is that Yojimbo is the only player to appear on the list twice. Now, you could argue that Doc Evil has also made consecutive finals, because to go on a run of 3 is to go on consecutive finals of 1 and 2 and consecutive finals of 2 and 3. So you could argue Doc Evil is the only other player to have made more than one pair of consecutive finals. But by that standard, Yojimbo has made 4 pairs of consecutive finals. However you want to parse this, Yojimbo's ability to make finals is just really untouched. A lot of other great players here. Sir Smokes with his really great 2013 we haven't mentioned, but Smokes was just always very steadily performing well. A bit like a better version of Steve, where he'd like hit icons. He wasn't really going that deep, but his like underlying numbers always suggested like this is like top 10 player on the site. And then in 2013, he really has a fantastic run that he will tell you was shit and not worth anything, but it's really impressive. Don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I always love Sipes' 08 run. You know, he's this player who basically never made it past round 2 and then suddenly wins finals and semis consecutive tournaments in one of the great runs. We'll talk more about that later. Ulti is a player. By the way, I'm sorting here by earlier to do it, gets listed higher. Um, Ulti has got to be one of the players I just wish I knew more about. It seems really historically kind of underrated. Like, we have these short flash in the pan players with incredible results. Doc Evil, Karmazin, Virgil. We talk mostly about Doc and Karma, but I really wonder where Ulti should go in that conversation. Obviously not up with Doc and Karma and like Nimloth maybe, but like, you know, I had people rank the early greats, and Ulti basically didn't show up there, and I wonder if that was a serious omission. Other names here are names you'd expect to see. It is also possible that in the recent run, because Delhi and Turdz are finaling everything, this is one of the places where I think the list may have changed. I think it's possible Delhi has a run, I didn't check, of 3 or 4 now. It's possible Turdz has a run of 3 or 4 now. This has been touched. Now, you might say they're doing it with shorter tournaments. It is worth noting Yojimbo's 14-15 run is also with somewhat shorter tournaments, though usually at least around longer than the ones we have now. So your mileage may vary on that, but I do think Delhi and Turdz should feel most robbed on this list. Yeah. So you want to be Great Sephiroth. Now, Great Sephiroth is basically the best player not in the GOAT conversation. And as soon as you start, if you just removed these 4 or 5, if you want Doc Evil players from the history of Triple Triad, you'd suddenly be like, Great Sephiroth. Has there ever been anyone as good as him? He seems pretty good. He has a similar career to Sujiro, but I decided to take players' first 19 tournaments. Great Sephiroth basically is a 19 tournament run, then goes mostly inactive and happens to go out in a round 1 like a year and a half, 2 years later. But he basically is this 19 tournament run. You could even cut it to 17 and keep all his good stuff, but clearly he's playing actively for about 19 tournaments. And he just has this incredible run. So I wanted to say, do other people have their first 19 tournaments as good runs as he did? Now, of course, first 19 tournaments is a very specific thing, right? If I do nothing for 10 tournaments and then I'm mind-blowingly good for 19 more, my career is probably better than someone who is great for 19 tournaments, but it's not going to show up as well here, right? This is not an all-encompassing number. We're not pretending it is. But yeah, Great Sephiroth, if you exclude the really big names and you compare his 19 tournament run, it is better than anyone else's. Let's take a look. And you can see that you basically have the Big Four and Great Sephiroth, and Great Sephiroth is very firmly performing at the level they are over this run. And then you see something of a drop-off. Cookie is the 2 tournament wins. Nightwish and Kana really racked up match wins. You can see in the wins column. There's a lot to parse here. I want to shout out Akiyama, who we haven't mentioned yet. And it was harder to get wins when he was doing this. So a really high win rate. Easier to get achievement, but harder to get wins. And so his win total, I think, is really impressive here. Yeah, Kana's 06 to 09 run is fantastic. We see D for the first time showing up. And we see a bunch of other names we should be very used to seeing. These are, of course, the big names for players whose careers weren't incredibly short. Sujiro, not long enough to make this list, but Sujiro would clock in on the list. if he had played, 2 more tournaments. Um, yeah, you can parse this list if you want, but basically it's to say Great Sephiroth over the time he was there has a run that puts him on a similar level as the very all-time greats. Now, Yojimbo and Delial both got better after their initial runs, right? You might say Deli peaks '07 into '08. That might be true, but this includes '05, '06 when he went out in the first round of every tournament. So those really draw down his numbers in a way that his numbers in the mid 2010s and now in the mid 2020s are not drawn down. So like, and this is before Yojimbo really became the monster he became in 12 and 13. So you could say, all 4 of these, once we make a few little adjustments, are ahead, but he looks a lot closer to them, or he looks closer to them than he looks to the field to me. Now you could say Nightwish and Kana maybe are close, but I think he looks closer to the big 4 than to the field, at least by this way of looking at it. So you want to be Kana. Isn't it interesting how many triple triad people like Invader Zim? Incidentally, I promised Deli, now it's got to be a couple years ago, that I would try Invader Zim. He was very nice about it. He said, I think you should try it. Would really appreciate it if you try it. If you don't like it, just let me know. Like, I won't be offended if you just bounce off it. Just like, I think you might like it. If you don't, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Really nice, really friendly. I have not tried it. This is my, confession. I really should, because he was very sweet and kind and supportive about it. This was not one of those times when someone is being pushy about something, or when it's kind of clear that you have to at least pretend to like it to not hurt their feelings. No, he was very generous about it, and I still didn't do it. And I've watched a lot of trash TV since instead, and I'd forgotten about it, but making this video, I remembered, and ooh, I feel a bit guilty there. So yeah, you should yell at me in the comments that I should go try Invader Zim. It probably won't be for me, but that's fine. Part of the deal is I'm allowed to bounce off it. All right, so Kana just has this absurd win rate. Like, he just keeps winning tournaments. He's just so steady. And what I noticed looking through his resume was it's just so many tournaments with at least 3 wins. There are tournaments with activity wins. There are shorter tournaments. It's really hard to win 3+ games tournament after tournament. It's really hard to win 3 games in a tournament once, but it's really, really hard to do it just tournament after tournament after tournament, year after year after year. And Kana just did so. I was also, when I was looking at this category, there's a run by Dream Virus where he doesn't quite end up making our list here, but Dream Virus very early on has like a 4-1, 3-1, 3-1 or something like that, where he somehow gets like 1 icon or 0 icons out of it, which is insane. You can't get 0 icons on a 4-1. But like, he ends up having this really good 3-4 turn, and he extends it too. Anyway, I also honorable mention Yojimbo and Delial both already appear on the list, but they would have appeared another time each had I not run out of space. So let's look at the list of most 3+ win tournaments in a row. And you can see Kana has the most with 6 in a row. Over those 6 tournaments, he got 22 wins, which is the most here. Only Nightwish has made it to Nightwish and Chickeny have made it to 5, and everyone else is on 4 or fewer. Again, there's another Yojimbo and Deli appearance being cut at the bottom. But it's just really hard to win 3 games every tournament. There are players like Seto and Delial that I think are a little boom or bust if you look at their history. Like, Deli either wins or goes out round 2. Seto either wins or goes out round 1. That's not quite true, but it's a lot closer to true than it should be. I think often, like, if they are in form, they are in form, and they will go deep. Not players you want to play against in, like, the quarterfinals. Yeah. Is there anyone else worth mentioning here? It's funny, Doc Evil played 3 tournaments and makes this list very respectably. Kamikaze we haven't talked much about, but he's been really high on a lot of these lists. Of the, like, it's hard not to put the big 4 and Doc Evil in a top 10. I think Great Sephiroth is the next most locked top 10 player. And then it's between Kamikaze, Nightwish, and MC. And I don't know how I order them, but I'd probably have them 7th through 9th. And then there's like 5 players that deserve to be top 10 that are fighting out for the 10th spot. But I think that's the top 9. Like, I'm a lot more confident about my top 9 than my top 10. Like, Kana should obviously be in the top 10. Slash of Time should obviously be in the top 10. Turdz, Akiyama, and Vid have all made it very clear they should be in the top 10. It's possible Chickeny belongs in the top 10. Like, Karmazin, right? Um, I think that's all the contenders. Huge apologies if I'm missing someone. Like, I didn't even say Cookie. I don't think Cookie's top 10, but like, I might be just being stupid. Um, so like, there's so many contenders for that 10th spot. I do think Kamikaze, who again we haven't talked much about, I do think he's there. I think it would be very hard to construct that list with Kamikaze not there. Uh, Honestly, at this point, it might be even crazier to exclude Turdz. I might be too low on Turdz. That's possible. He's really done crazy things of recent. So you want to be Karmazin. Karmazin didn't play long. Mostly, I saw him playing open trade. He did not play tournaments while I was on the site. He played 2 tournaments, went 11-1. He is the second highest win percentage of all time. Now, we're going to look at, for this category, the longest win streaks, because I thought he had an 11-game win streak. Sadly, he went 4 games, then he lost 1, then he won 7. So he doesn't actually have the 11-game win streak and will not, in fact, appear on this list. So I did a bad job on this, but I wanted to honor his just absurdly high win rate, and the fact that, like, if you go through the history of who I thought was the best player in the world, once I'm vaguely competent, the first player I was convinced was the best was Karmazin. And then I switched back and forth between Deli and Seto for a while. And then I decided it was me. And I may or may not have been right about that. And at some point, I think I fell off. And I thought Deli was sort of in a rough patch at that point. I think most people thought it was Yojimbo, and I thought it was Seto for a bit, but that might have been like rivalry or jealousy of Yojimbo. Hard to say. At some point, I thought it was Yojimbo. And by the time I left, I definitely thought it was Yojimbo. But yeah, but of kind of, there are basically 4 players other than myself that I ever thought was the best player in the world, and Karmazin was one of them. And so that seems to be like, obviously I am. Actually, I might have thought Great Sephiroth was at some point. Okay, so there might have been 5. There might have been a moment I thought Great Sephiroth was. But let's say there were 5 players I've ever thought, other than myself, were the best player in the world. Obviously, I have a big ego, you know. You have to compete. Or, yeah, I guess maybe you don't have to, but I certainly need to. But yeah, I thought Karmazin was really special. And as it says in some notes here, if there's one player I wish I had records of their play, like, okay, a lot of people would take Doc Evil, you know, Nimloth. I got a tiny bit of Great Sephiroth. I'm sure there's lots of other names. But for my money, I would want Karmazin. If I could get like one player to return. Actually, yeah. I think it is Karmazin, but I'd also love to get some Yojimbo games on record. I have one Yojimbo game because Cool Spot happened to take some screenshots. And I don't have the whole game. I just have like 4 moves of it. So yeah, I think Karmazin is the player because I remember thinking he was so creative, and I really wonder what I'd think now. And we're gonna do another category for Doc Evil. How long have we been going? Is this video going forever? It could be shorter. All right. This is one of our last categories, hopefully. So the longest win streaks. On the right, you can see more people who had 8-game win streaks. So basically winning a tournament, and then depending how long it was, winning the first 1 to 3 games of the next tournament gets you to 8. And then you can see some 9s, some 10s, some 11s, 113 from Seto, which is crazy, and then an 18 from Doc Evil. This is not our only category that will honor Doc Evil, but oh my god, does that streak still holds up really well. We can make arguments about how strong the competition was. It's quite early in the site, but we got to remember people were coming over from other sites. A lot of the games didn't have combo in tournaments. You can look at when tournament finals start reliably having combo. I think that's interesting. I think that speaks to some change in I tend to think '06 onwards are the players that really hold up better. But whatever caveats you want to give, he's at 18 win streak. Like the next highest is 13. What are we doing? Doc Evil, phenomenal run. Also, again, Kamikaze, really, really high. Kamikaze, very good. I love Sife's run in '08. There's no other player who has all of their success so concentrated in one 6 month period of time, and then virtually no tournament success. Like really none outside of that. It's one of the great like sparks that ever happened. And you can see names like Delial appearing over and over again, and Yojimbo. Yojimbo appearing 3 times over on the right is kind of nuts. All right, so you want to be Delial. This is probably when I should have said I apologize for not having watched Invader Zim yet. Now I just really have to, don't I? What do you got to do? Well, Deli is the all-time leader in every counting category. He also has the most ridiculous finals run of all time. He is 11 out of 12 in the finals. Just utterly absurd, having just won another. So we got to go in a different direction. So the other thing I noticed about Deli's career, and I've noticed this before, but is he had a very long streak of tournaments without first round exits. So to make this list, you got to play at least 9 straight tournaments. Okay, I mean you can take tournaments off, but of tournaments you played and didn't lose by inactivity, I gave you a pass for losing by inactivity. That doesn't count as ruining your streak. Though if I did, it would cut a few players. Cough, cough. Um, but yeah, just how long could you go without a first round exit? Turns out, pretty hard to do for a long time. Some players that I think are really good that made it to 7 that, uh, you know, aren't getting many mentions. Meta, Coops, Waltz, Fisto, Kazik, Omega Weapon, Dorf, and Bardock. I cannot bring up Fisto without mentioning his greatest and most hilarious achievement. He's the only person to win an icon without playing a single game, I believe. Or without winning a single game. He went 0-1 for the tournament and got a quarterfinals icon with 3 buys. Now, it's possible in the modern times someone has done that due to the shorter tournaments, but he did it in a 6-rounder. I think that's beautiful. Also, a good player. Omega Weapon's one of those early players that just looks really good from the numbers I have. Yeah, Dorf was also always really a steady tournament performer. Sort of in that like Steve group, except Dorf grabbed a few icons, but of just like consistently wins a few rounds and just needs one more round for it to be a really good tournament, and consistently is kind of one round away from having had a spectacular tournament, where you just have to assume like they got a bit unlucky to not, you'd trade in like 5 good runs for 1 great run and 4 mediocre runs, right? Probably. And it seems unlucky that didn't happen. Yeah. Coops has a finals run. And Waltz has a 2 semis runs, maybe? All right, so here's the players with the longest streaks. I used achievement to tiebreak ties. Normally, I've been organizing ties by just who did it earlier. Here, I used achievement, but didn't list it for whatever reason. A shout out to Gambit X and Dream Virus. Those are really impressive streaks from players who are a bit less heralded. Other names might be the ones you expected, but Vid, after his return, Vid is actually a player. I didn't talk about him in the broccoli section because he didn't win a tournament in his early run. But he basically disappears from the site for 5 years. And when he comes back, he gets really, really good and just really steadily puts up results until he peaks in 2013, ends up becoming a multi-time tournament winner, and is still one of the best players around. Also, Chickeny for a long time was my greatest player to never win. He ruined that by winning a tournament. But this is one of those lists where you can see that he, despite not winning tournaments, was really doing things that were very difficult and very rarely achieved. Yeah. It's fun to mention players that we haven't talked much about. I haven't talked much about the Polish brothers, but they're just always great on these lists. What's there to say? Mafi Josie. I like Mafi Josie. And Homer. It's really nice to see Homer. Homer has a really nice stretch, mostly 07, 08-ish, but really nice run. And ended up getting very unlucky that I don't remember the details, but like could not play a match in a semifinals and ended up having to forfeit on his furthest run ever. When maybe he could have made a finals. Probably doesn't win it. Seto wins that tournament. It's hard to beat Seto in the finals, but really close to getting that finals, and with a bunch of deep runs consecutively, and usually in longer tournaments. All right, so our final ones, you want to be Doc Evil. This one will be a little longer because I decided to just look at everyone's. Sorry, I just dropped something. Everyone's best 3 tournament runs, and yeah, Doc Evil has the greatest 3 tournament run ever, winning 2 and finaling the 3rd. And we're just gonna look at all the 3 tournament runs. I'm gonna give the wins, losses, win percentage, and achievement over those 3 tournaments. We'll rank by win percentage with achievement as tiebreaker. I decided to look at players that didn't win a tournament first. These are all the ones to go at least 75% over 3 tournaments. Turns out that's really hard because it means averaging a 3-1, and as we know from earlier, going 3-1 is really, really hard. Averaging a 3-1 is a little easier in some ways because you could go 4-1 in one, say, and then you can go 2-1 in another, but is also, of course, really difficult. You can see Ray Aminator somehow managed to lose more games than there were tournaments he played in. That is, of course, because of the double elimination tournament. And once again, you can see just how good Ulti was in those early years. I think the popular picks for greatest player to never win a tournament are Metis. It's probably the most popular. Piggy Man tends to be who I push. And Metis is the most finals. It used to be Chickeny was up there, but obviously Chickeny is now a winner. But, so Metis, Piggy Man, and I used to hear a lot of Kazakh and Jadat as well. Jadat, because he spaced out all his good results, never shows up great on my list, but really is very good. Very, very good finals run in a very difficult 7-rounder. And occasionally I'll hear Grat. And those are the main names I hear. And I suspect that Ulti and Kefka are getting really served poorly. Now, based on the games you see Kefka playing when he comes back, I think he's sort of a non-combo specialist, an odd rule set specialist that might not translate to modern tournaments, but I think is really cool and impressive, and it's neat for there to be players who are good at different things. You'll also note Homer's record actually here should be the highest. Because he forfeited a game in the semifinals, he really should be on 10 wins and 2 losses. But I thought it was unfair to give people credit essentially for not playing games. So if you happen to be knocked out of a tournament, looking at you, Polish brothers, without playing the game, I do assign you a loss so that you don't have that kind of inflated performance for not playing. But you could definitely argue Homer deserves to be very high on this list. Jaws also really high-end non-winner. My pick is Piggy Man for greatest non-winner, but there are a lot of good choices on a list like this. Yeah. Focus had a really nice 2010 that I think, like, if you look at Occult fans at the time, if there'd been like 3 up, 3 down, or like new players to look at articles, I feel like Focus deserved a bit more mention than he got. All right, and here is our kind of second run. This is not the top run. This is the next crew because I divided up. I just wanted to list more names. So here is the 81 to 85% crew, and the next list is basically 85% up. It'll actually include some more 84.6s, but it's basically 85 up. And a few players that got cut for space I listed the other 81.8s slashed twice. Multiple years apart, too. I wish I had space to list him, or probably should have just made another sheet. And, yeah. Any names that are fun to mention here? No, I think we talked about everyone. And then for our final section, you can see that Doc Evil still has the greatest 3-tournament run of all time. And he did it in his 3 and only 3 tournaments, which is pretty cool. Here I want to give a shout out to Bren. When he won Triad Wars 3, he didn't even sign up for the tournament, but someone withdrew, and he was put in their place. They ended up putting his name as Badusai, which he had never gone by, but there was a player named Badusai that he wasn't even the one he was it the one he was replacing? I don't remember now. It was all a lot of nonsense. I believe he is the only player to win a tournament without signing up. There was a tournament that Yojimbo won, I believe, either won or made finals, but I think he won it without being in the initial bracket, but he, there was a buy and he said, oops, I wasn't around for a month or whatever. I missed the signups. Can I go in? They put him in and then he wins. But Bren's the only one to just straight up not sign up for a tournament and go on to win it. He quarterfinals the tournament after. He has this really nice run late 05 into early 06. Never replicates it, but that's cool. He and Syph are the two players that I think have these really like you can win one tournament and never replicate. There's a bunch of players like that. But neither of them just win one tournament. They both have really good runs around it. Bren has two quarterfinals right near it and just consistently winning games. And Syph has his win finals and semifinals. And those are the two sort of standout kind of three tournament runs from players that otherwise were relatively low impact in tournaments. Like all the players you're seeing on this list are players who like had a ton of impact in tournaments for a pretty long time. And then there's Syph and Bren, who were just really, but like again, their supporting results really make clear they were very high level for those periods of time. But unlike the others here, they didn't, maintain it for years and years and years. Anyhow, I think that's all I got for you. Normally I end on a Finn screen, but I thought it would be fun to just pull out a bunch of stats once again. I did this to procrastinate updating my spreadsheets for Delial's latest tournament win, so I guess I gotta go do that. And I gotta watch Invader Zim, which, yeah. I know actually nothing about except the graphics I've seen on Triple Triad, so it will be an interesting experience. Alright, I guess that's good. I just go on and on in these videos, don't I? Apologies.